Hi, this is James from Mad Science Films, and today we're looking at the Pocket 4K, and more specifically how the Pocket 4K compares to the likes of the GH5 and the Sony a7 III in regards to video production. So we recently got our Pocket 4K, and after posting online about us getting the camera, we were asked our thoughts about the camera, but in particular how we thought the camera stacked up against the likes of the GH5 and the Sony a7 III. So that's what we're going to delve into today, see how it fares, is it the right camera for you if you do video production, the strengths and weaknesses of all three cameras. When we look at the three cameras, I think it's a fair comparison as all three are in that price range between £1,000 and £800. All three can produce good professional video. All three are regarded as professional camera bodies. So it is a fair comparison between those three. Now I could chuck in the likes of the Canon EOS R and also the Nikon Z6 and Nikon Z7. But I haven't got much experience with those cameras, and I think this would be an even longer video if I did, so we're going to keep to those three cameras, the Pocket 4K, GH5 and Sony a7 III. What I would say is if you're a big video production company, you're obviously going to be using bigger cameras. You could probably afford to use bigger rigs, and may look at these as B or C cams, but these are for the guys who are up and coming. Video production companies, one-man band video production companies. This is mainly for you guys and to give you some insight into these three cameras. So the first category we're going to look at is form factor, and the form factor of the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. It is similar to a modern DSLR or mirrorless camera, but it is quite wide. Now that's something to consider when it comes to gimbal work, if you're doing a lot of gimbal work. As the Pocket 4K is a cinema camera, you're most likely gonna wanna modify it. And if you're thinking about modifying it, it's probably gonna be in a cage. If it's in a cage, then you can easily offset the camera to get that on your gimbal. I've recently done this with my Zion Crane 2, which it works reasonably well. There are certain motions you're not able to achieve because of the way the camera's offset, but straightforward kind of tracking shots are achievable with the Pocket 4K on a gimbal. Whereas with the GH5 and the Sony a7 III, because they have a quite normal size and form factor, you'll find hardly any issues with mounting the GH5 or the Sony a7 III to most gimbals. Again, because this is a cinema camera, to get the full functioning capabilities of the camera, you are probably gonna have to modify it, which means the overall size of the camera and the rig will be much bigger than the Sony a7 III or the GH5. Next, battery life. Now the Pocket 4K comes with a Canon LP6 battery. When the Pocket 4K first came out, people were really ripping on the battery. People getting about 25 to 30 minutes of record time. Sometimes those batteries would just die, not even at 10%. There's been a recent firmware update, which means the battery now lasts for about 50 minutes, which is an improvement, but still very, very poor. However, the GH5 and the Sony a7 III, they both have great batteries. These batteries can last 2 hours, which is absolutely fantastic. So in terms of battery life, GH5 and Sony a7 III are definitely the winners there. So another category is video codecs and recording media. I mentioned recording media, i.e. SD cards, CF cards, because there are some people out there who would believe that all their SD cards will work with most cameras, which is the case if you're planning to sacrifice quality and record at really low data rates and really crappy video codecs. The highest recording video quality possible for each camera is for the Sony a7 III, that shoots XAVCS 8-bit 420, 4K 30 frames per second at 100 megabits per second. The GH5 shoots all-eye 10-bit 422, 4K 60 frames per second at 400 megabits per second. And the Pocket 4K shoots 75 frames per second, a B-RAW 3:1 ratio, and that is 135 megabytes per second. Out of the three cameras, the Sony a7 III will cost less in terms of recording media, as the video codecs and data rates are not that demanding compared to the Pocket 4K and the GH5. There is a more cost-effective solution for the GH5, and that would be to purchase an external recorder. A good option would be the Atmos Ninja 5 that records the SSD drives. So all around it'll be more cost effective, like I said, rather than buying multiple SD cards, which cost the earth. But also you get a really good field monitor with some amazing video capabilities. A good way around the recording media issue for the Blackmagic Pocket 4K and avoiding spending loads of money on CF cards and SD cards is to get a Blackmagic Design recommended SSD drive. One of the most popular SSD drives for the Pocket 4K is the Samsung T5s. You can get a 500 gig Samsung T5 SSD drive for around £90, which is dirt cheap in comparison to those expensive SD cards. So video capabilities, variable frame rates, another thing video creators will want to know about, because you're doing your fancy slow-mo, B-roll kind of stuff. That's going to be important for you guys. So with the recent firmware update, the Pocket 4K now shoots 4K 75 frames per second, 2.8K 80 frames per second, and 2.6K 120 frames per second. Amazing options there for you. Fantastic slow motion capabilities with that camera. The quality is fantastic. Yeah, amazing for video production work. The GH5, well, that can shoot 60 frames per second at 4K, and it can go up to 180 frames per second at 1080 HD. Again, not too shabby, happy days there. The Sony a7 III, well, that could only do 30 frames per second at 4K, and only goes up to 100 frames per second in 1080. The 1080 100 frames per second isn't the sharpest, it's a bit soft. I've not tried it out, but I've heard and seen examples of if you go down to 60 frames per second with 1080 on the Sony a7 III, the quality does improve slightly, so it is an option. But 100 frames per second is there for the Sony a7 III. Yeah, so out of the three, the Sony a7 III is not the best. Top one there is the Pocket 4K. Definitely keep that in mind. Last one we're going to cover is image quality. The image quality on the Blackmagic Pocket 4K is better than the GH5 and the Sony a7 III. It's the main feature of the camera, and again, thanks to that color science that Blackmagic Design has, it just looks very cinematic, very filmic. You need to do a lot with lights, production design, all the rest of it, obviously, and lenses play a big part, but nevertheless, the color science for the Blackmagic Design cameras is just phenomenal. The Lumix GH2, well, that's not to be sniffed at. Straight out of the camera, I was quite happy with the overall video quality I was getting from the camera. And if you purchase the Vlog, with a bit of grading, you can tweak things here and there, but out of the camera, very pleased with the image quality from the GH5. The Sony cameras, they've been heavily criticized over the years for their poor color science, people complaining. I think with the Sony a7 III, they did improve on their color science. When I got my Sony a7 III and I shot some video, I was very happy with what I was seeing. And again, with S-Log 2 and 3, you can tweak and mess with skin tones a little bit. Obviously, you need to do a lot in camera and not push it too much because it's only 8 bits. But I don't think it's a terrible video image you're getting from the Sony a7 III. It just needs a bit of work. A little side note here, we need to mention the overheating for the Sony cameras. A couple of times my Sony a7 III overheated and I couldn't replicate that again. I ran some tests to try and push it to overheat. I sat here, ran 4 times in a row the full record limit of the camera, and not once did it overheat. And then flash forward to a month or so later, randomly the camera just shuts off. That is worrying for me, and that's why I sold the camera. I have heard stories of people not suffering with their Sony a7 III. In fact, they've managed to kind of go long hauls without any overheating, but I personally did suffer with my Sony a7 III, and because of that unpredictability, I sold my Sony a7 III. But that doesn't mean that yours is going to fail or overheat, but it is something to keep in mind. And that brings me to recording limits. One thing that the GH5 and the Pocket 4K has that the Sony doesn't have, and that is a record limit. The Sony a7 III record limit is about 29 minutes to half an hour. So if you are planning to do long format videos or events or speaking, you know with the GH5 and the Pocket 4K, you can go as long as your SSD drives or SD cards would allow, or your battery. But with the Sony, you're capped. So definitely something to consider. Again, depending on what kind of work you do. I'm assuming most video production companies, videographers out there want something without any record limit. So that is a big negative towards the Sony a7. So in summary, the Pocket 4K, of course, can be used for video production. Maybe a bit of a hassle due to its form factor and its inevitable modification, meaning the rig's going to be bigger. If you imagine you're on a shoot, you're in some type of workplace, time is against you, you need to get different kinds of shots, and you want to go from gimbal to slider, you know, it's going to be a hell of an issue to strip down the camera, the Pocket 4K that is, get it on the sticks, get it on the gimbal, back and forth, plus with that battery life, constantly worried about that. Putting in measures to have decent battery for gimbal, you know, there's V-mount options and all that, but it is a lot of faffing. That's why I think I would recommend the GH5. It produces great quality video, the battery lasts, you know, you've got the flippy out screen, it's weather sealed, you've got IBIS, you've got so many good features in that little camera, and it's so versatile and small, packs an amazing punch. So GH5 for me, that is the camera I'd use for video production. And again, it depends on the size of your operation as well. If you're a bigger budget, if you're a bigger video production company that has a bigger budget, then definitely you could get away with having multiple Pocket 4Ks, one setup for a gimbal, one setup for a tripod or whatever kind of rig you're putting it on. So it's definitely doable, but if you're kind of up and coming and you're a smaller outfit, GH5, absolutely bang for your buck. I think it's the cheapest out of the 3 too, which helps, and I definitely would pick the GH5. Thanks for watching. Anything you want to add, leave them in the comments section down below. Please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to stay tuned for more from us at Mad Science Films, and we'll see you next time.